"Oh my God, my babies are dying. Someone came in and stabbed my babies."
8 days after that call, this same woman stood at her son's grave, laughing, chewing gum, spraying silly string in the air. 29 years later, she is still on death row. And there is DNA evidence sitting in a Texas lab, right now, that both sides say could finally answer the one question nobody has ever settled. Did Darlie Routier murder her own children? Or is an innocent mother about to run out of appeals? Before we get into the evidence, you need to know who Devon and Damon Routier were. Devon was 6, the big brother, the protector, always looking out for his little brothers. Damon was 5, the wild one, the one who never stopped moving. They had a baby brother, Drake, just 7 months old. 2 little boys who should be in their 30s right now. Instead, on June 6, 1996, they bled to death on the floor of their own home in a quiet suburb of Dallas, Texas, while their mother lay a few feet away with a knife wound that came within 2 millimeters of her carotid artery. Here's what we're going to find out today. First, was there really an intruder that night, or did investigators walk into a staged crime scene? Second, how did a jury convict a mother in 10 hours after watching a birthday video when the same jury never heard about a bloody fingerprint that has never, to this day, been matched to anyone? And third, right now, in 2026, there's DNA sitting in a Texas lab from a 3rd round of testing that could blow this case wide open. What does it say, and why won't anyone release it? Stay with me to the end, because the newest development in this case might be the most important piece of evidence yet. Rowlett, Texas, a bedroom community northeast of Dallas, the kind of place people move to so their kids can ride bikes in the cul-de-sac. At 2:31 a.m. on June 6, 1996, dispatchers got a call from that address. A woman, screaming, telling them a man had broken into her house and stabbed her and her 2 boys while they slept. Police were there in 3 minutes. They found 6-year-old Devon already dead on the floor of the downstairs den. 5-year-old Damon was still alive. He'd die in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Darlie herself had cuts to her throat and her arm. Her husband, Darren, had been asleep upstairs the entire time with their infant son, Drake, and he was completely unharmed. Darlie told police the same story she'd tell for the next 3 decades. A man, roughly 6 feet tall, had gotten into the house, attacked all 3 of them, and fled. She said she chased him part way before turning back to her sons. Investigators found a window screen in the garage that had been sliced open, a possible entry point. On paper, it lined up, but almost immediately, small things stopped adding up. This is where the case starts to unravel. Depending on who you ask, police said the windowsill where the intruder allegedly climbed through was covered in a thick, undisturbed layer of dust. Nobody had touched it. The mulch in the flower bed directly beneath that window, the exact spot a grown man would have to land on his way out, was undisturbed too, not a single footprint. And inside the garage itself, officers found no blood. None. Not one drop. Despite the fact that the boys had just been stabbed with enough force to be fatal, and despite the fact that Darlie herself was actively bleeding from her throat and arm during the time she said she was chasing this man. Then there was the sink. Officers said it looked strangely clean, almost too clean. So they sprayed it with luminol, the chemical that reveals blood invisible to the naked eye, and cut the lights. According to investigators, the entire basin and the counters around it lit up. Someone had washed blood out of that sink. The luminol also revealed footprints in front of it, and police said those footprints matched Darlie. And then there's the detail defenders of Darlie, still argue about most fiercely today. A bloody child's handprint on the leather sofa in the den, a print investigators said had been wiped away, but which luminol brought back to the surface. To prosecutors, this handprint told a devastating story. One of the boys had tried to reach out, and someone had cleaned it up afterward. To Darlie's supporters, every one of these details has a competing explanation. That the cleaning evidence is misread, that dust patterns aren't reliable forensic science, that panic and chaos in the middle of the night don't leave the same footprints a controlled experiment would. Real doubt exists here, but at the time, to the detectives standing in that house, the physical evidence was starting to tell a very different story than the one Darlie was telling them. Here's something that still gives people chills when they hear it today. In the middle of that frantic 911 call, with her sons dying next to her, Darlie tells the dispatcher something strange. She says, "I wonder if we could have gotten the prints maybe," referring to the knife. At trial, one of the responding officers, David Waddell, testified about that moment. His words were blunt. If she was thinking about fingerprints on a knife in that moment, he found it hard to believe she wasn't capable of tending to her own children first. An audio expert who later analyzed the call reached his own unsettling conclusion, that based on background sound, Darlie had moved through at least 3 different rooms of the house during the call, which didn't match the story she gave police about staying near her sons the entire time. None of this is a confession. None of it is a smoking gun on its own. But piece by piece, investigators say, small inconsistencies were stacking up. 75 yards from the Routier house, in an alley, police found a tube sock. Lab testing confirmed it had both Devon's and Damon's blood on it. It also matched a pair of socks that belonged to Darlie's husband, Darren. Prosecutors' theory: Darlie planted that sock to fake an escape route for her invented intruder, running it out to the alley and back before calling 911. Her defense has spent decades calling that theory almost physically impossible. Darlie was bleeding from a throat wound at the time. The idea that a badly injured woman sprinted 150 yards round trip, in the dark, in the handful of minutes between the attack and her call for help, then came back inside and re-injured herself convincingly enough to fool emergency room doctors. Supporters say it simply doesn't hold up. Here's the number though, and you can decide for yourself. At a casual 3-mile-an-hour walking pace, 150 yards takes about 2 minutes. Running it takes far less. The window of time between the attack and the call was tight, but according to prosecutors, not impossible. This single piece of evidence, one bloody sock in an alley, has been argued over in courtrooms for almost 30 years, and it still hasn't been fully resolved. This is the piece of evidence you probably already know, even if you've never heard the rest of this case. 8 days after her sons were killed, Darlie invited a local news crew to film a birthday celebration at their grave. It would have been Devon's 7th birthday. What the cameras caught was Darlie and her family and friends laughing, chewing gum, singing happy birthday, and spraying cans of silly string over the graves. Rowlett police had secretly planted a hidden microphone at the site, without a warrant, and recorded a solemn prayer service that happened earlier that same day, a recording so legally questionable it was later thrown out of the trial entirely, and the officers involved took the Fifth Amendment when asked about it under oath. But the birthday footage, filmed openly by the news crew Darlie herself invited, wasn't covered by that same problem. It was fair game, and prosecutors used it like a weapon. 4 days after that video aired, Darlie was arrested and charged with capital murder. At trial, prosecutors played an edited version of that footage for the jury, 8 separate times. Jury deliberations lasted just 10 hours. Guilty. Death sentence. To this day, the silly string video is the single most famous piece of evidence in this case. More famous than the sock, more famous than the fingerprint, more famous than the DNA. And here's what almost never gets said in the true crime retellings. A forensic psychologist testified for the defense that what looked like coldness was actually a documented trauma response, that survivors of profound loss sometimes experience exactly this kind of dissociative, almost manic behavior, and that judging grief by how convincing it looks on camera is not science, it's instinct. The jury didn't buy it. Whether they should have is still being debated by legal experts almost 30 years later. Now here's the piece of this case that Darlie's supporters bring up more than anything else: a bloody fingerprint, found on a coffee table in the exact room where the boys were killed. Investigators labeled it Exhibit 85J. It has never, not once, not in almost 30 years, been matched to Darlie, to Darren, to either of the boys, or to anyone in that household. In 2019, a Dallas County judge finally ordered that print run through the FBI's National Fingerprint Database. No match came back. The state's own fingerprint expert, a man named Pat Wertheim, testified years later before an appeals court that he could not rule out Darlie's right ring finger as a possible source of that print, meaning it's contested, not confirmed as belonging to a mystery intruder. But it has also never been confirmed as hers. Nearly 30 years later, an unidentified bloody fingerprint sits in the middle of a murder scene, and nobody can tell you for certain whose hand left it there. That single unanswered question is the entire reason this case is still active today. This is the update you came here for. In 2008, Texas's highest criminal court ordered new DNA testing on evidence that had never been fully analyzed back in 1996. The bloody sock, the nightshirt Darlie wore that night, fingernail clippings from both boys, hair samples, and the murder weapon itself. The goal? Find out if there's genetic material on any of it that doesn't belong to Darlie or her sons. That testing is still not finished. 18 years later, in 2015, one round of results came back on the nightshirt, and it wasn't what Darlie's team was hoping for. The profile pointed back to Darlie herself, with odds prosecutors describe as effectively 1 in 150 quintillion. But testing on other items, the knife handle, a cap's sweatband, the sock, came back inconclusive. Too degraded, too much time had passed. In 2018, a third and even more extensive round of testing began, this time backed by both the prosecution and the defense. Dozens of individual blood samples from around the crime scene, samples that were never fully typed in 1996, are being run through modern DNA technology, far more sensitive than anything available at the time of the trial. And as of 2026, right now, those results are still not fully public. Darlie's longtime defense attorney has said publicly that some of what's come back so far is, in his words, encouraging, though not what he'd call groundbreaking. Prosecutors maintain they remain confident in the conviction. Both sides are waiting on the same lab. Somewhere in a Texas facility, there is an answer to this case that has not been spoken out loud yet. Darlie Routier has been on Texas death row since February 1997. She is one of only a handful of women in the entire state under a death sentence. No execution date has ever been set, largely because of the ongoing DNA litigation. She and her husband Darren divorced in 2011, though he has said publicly, even after the divorce, that he still believes she's innocent. Her mother has spent almost 3 decades running a public campaign for her release. And here's a detail almost nobody brings up. Darlie was only ever tried for Damon's murder. She was also charged with capital murder in Devon's death, but nearly 30 years later, that second charge has simply never gone to trial. Legally, one of her son's deaths has never actually been resolved in a courtroom at all. Whatever you believe happened in that house on June 6, 1996, 2 little boys are gone, and they've been gone for almost 30 years. Devon would be in his mid-30s right now. Damon would have just turned 35. Their mother is either the person who took their lives, or she has spent 3 decades on death row for a crime someone else committed, while investigators never looked past the first suspect in front of them. That's not a comfortable answer. It's not supposed to be. So here's my question for you. If you were on that jury in 1997, watching that silly string video for the 8th time, would 10 hours have been enough for you to send someone to death row? Or does the unmatched fingerprint and the unresolved DNA change everything? Tell me where you land in the comments. I read every single one. The moment that DNA testing is finally released, I will be back with a full update. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because when this case moves, you're going to want to know first.